Hello, everyone. This is Mike Bellbauer from the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation, coming to you from Flagler Voice Podcast Studios here in Palm Coast. A very special guest with us today that I'll introduce to you in just a moment or two. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with you, and I'd like to take this time to introduce our guest today. He's a gentleman that came to our area and works in our area since I think it's 2020 when he came here. He is Chief Engert, if I got that right. If not, you can correct me. Chief is the chief out at our Flagler County Jail, better known as the Green Roof Inn. And he has brought with him, from him, his experiences from where he came from, a lot of things that have really benefited our community. And I wanted to have him on board here to talk about that, because a lot of what they do affects the people that we deal with in the world of recovery and helping them in their road to recovery, keeping them going, giving them alternatives, giving them some training for life while they're finishing their sentences. So, Chief, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's very nice to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. Give us a little background. I know you came from upstate New York, up around the Niagara area.
Western New York, yep.
Western New York.
Yes. So my career began in 1989, and I finished 30 years in Niagara County, New York, Niagara Falls, Buffalo region, 30 years there. The last 12 of which as a jail administrator, I was mostly focused on mental health, our medical, and our programming areas. We were successful at obtaining a grant through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and I kind of developed a treatment program, an in-house treatment program at the jail in conjunction with our drug court. And in New York, unlike Florida, every town, village, city, county are all incorporated. So in my county, I had three drug courts. I had 2 mental health courts, 2 domestic violence courts. So we had, a drug court in 3 cities, and then the county actually started a diversion court program as well. So I had 4 substance use disorder related treatment courts in my county. So it was a bit different. It's a little more streamlined here in Flagler, but that was a big part of my, the latter part of my career was that program. Sheriff Staley in 2019, he had launched a national search for a chief. His chief had retired. And I, at the time, they always say that you'll know when it's time. There was a day that, my fingerprints were on everything in that jail for 30 years. I had worked in training. I had been in booking. I had been in all different realms. And I remember coming back into my office, and I felt like I didn't belong here. And that was the first instance where I felt like it's time to move on. And I still enjoyed what I did. And I said, well, I wonder if I can recreate this whole scenario, this whole program somewhere else. And so I began a search, and I was a finalist. I turned down 2 places in Tennessee. I turned down an offer in New Hampshire. My wife had said if we were moving, it had to be near water. New Hampshire was near water, but wasn't real crazy about the cold.
It's going to stay it's near ice water.
So in 2019, I had moved through the process here in Flagler, and it was very slow and very methodical. Hadn't heard much, and so I remember I was flying out of Buffalo and to come down here, and I was told at that time that I was a finalist for the position. And so I thought I might want to visit Florida, because I had never been here I had never been in the state before. And so I flew into Orlando. The first live palm tree I ever saw was coming out of the airport on Jeff Fuqua Boulevard, getting on to 528. So that was my experience. I was driving down 95, and there was a torrential downpour that I had never experienced before. And all of a sudden I see everyone has 4-way flashers on, and they're all pulling off to the side. And I thought, well, this must be a state law. Put your 4-ways on and pull over. So I pulled over and put my 4-ways on. I've come to find out that
that's against the law.
That's against the law. But that was my first experience here in Florida. And to this day, I joke with the sheriff. He was very strategic in his process. At the time that I was a finalist here, I was also a finalist in Virginia. And so I flew out of Buffalo in November. It was the week before Thanksgiving of 2019. And I flew out of a snowstorm, and I remember thinking this might be the last time I ever have to shovel snow, and that was a pleasant thought. But I I thought to myself, this is just beautiful. I landed, it was 68 degrees, and I thought, wow, this is really neat. So the sheriff offered me the position in December of 2019, and I kid with him because he knew what he was doing. I said if we had been in the same position in June and I was a finalist in both places, I probably would have picked Virginia because I did not realize how hot it can get here in Florida. So, but the sheriff brought me here. He had a vision for expanding programming in the jail, expanding partnerships. He's a very prominent figure in our community, and he really wants to be engaged with the community and in partnership with the community. And there was a couple of areas that he really wanted to focus on. At the time, the suicide rate in Flagler County, we were, I think, number 3 per capita in the state, which was, directly tied to mental illness. And his mom, was in the mental health field. So he has a background and a life experience of being part of, the mental health community. And so with that, he kind of laid out, his vision, and he wanted and he felt like I was the right fit. And so here we are. I have brought a lot of different, programming developments here. We were successful at getting a grant through the Bureau of Justice Assistance first, and then a larger one through COSOP. And that launched the our SMART program. So we've got a treatment program, a fully full-time 40-hour week treatment program that operates for both males and females in the jail. We have a partnership with Flagler Technical College now. We've greatly expanded our vocational offerings. While we're treating substance use disorder, mental illness, because in my world, my clients they are co-occurring in almost all instances. So we also have the vocational track. So we've got a vinyl graphics application program. So all of the marked vehicles that you see, the Flagler County Sheriff's vehicles in the county, our boats, our trailers, insignias on the doors at the ops center and so forth, they're all done through our inmate graphic vinyl graphic program. HVAC. So we've got a number of program offerings now that greatly expand the opportunity. If an inmate, wants to take advantage of the time that they spend in the Green Roof Inn, they can really come out with a great deal of, accomplishment and tools, so to speak, in the toolkit to be able to be successful, whether it's in recovery or in the, in their career.
Yeah, I've known in that area there, too, you've also made contact with a lot of local businesses. So there's placement for these folks when they come out with the training they have.
Right.
So they can get good jobs. I mean, the goal for what you're doing and what we do in the drug court program is to turn these people into good, productive citizens of our county again. Help them out from where they were. Work on the problems that they went through and just make them a healthy, hardworking benefit to the community and to themselves. I was telling you earlier before we came on the air, currently the oldest sitting member on the Flagler County Drug Court team. I've been on it for 12 years, and I've gone through 5 judges now. Our new judge is the 5th judge that I've sat under. And in those early stages, there was programs out at the jail, most of them brought in from people from the outside, and I know you still have a lot of that going on, but there was nothing permanently from the jail. And before you came on board in 2020, we were having problems with the medical department. And we've seen great improvements in all those areas since you've come on. And I think the citizenry of Flagler County needs to see that, know it, and know that your department and our sheriff's department is doing more than they've done in the past and more than most communities in our state do.
Well, Mike, I would, as I look back, and the sheriff and I were talking about this recently, there has been a significant market shift in Flagler County for treatment opportunities, largely driven from the jail, which is very unusual, was really born out of necessity. When I came here in 2020 and we started our program, we had 0 sober living houses in Flagler County. I mean, I had no place to, when you're trying to change people, places, culture, things, going back to the same home, the same toxic relationship was, detrimental to the success of that individual. We now have, upwards of, we're coming on almost 10 residential sober living environments for us to be able to release inmates to. We had no medical assisted treatment providers in this county in 2020 except for one, and he was a pediatrician that did it on Saturday mornings for cash. And frankly, that to me is not an effective MAT program. There was no associated counseling with it. That practice no longer exists. But today, we have more than 5 full-time MAT providers in our community. Individuals who utilize MAT as part of their recovery plan can access the medications that they need to be successful. So, a lot of this, Epic, for example. I mean, when I came here, we had one behavioral health practice in the county, and we had no mental health services in the jail except for part-time, basis, and really it wasn't mental health service. It was really more of a screening service, and then everyone was referred to medical for med management. Well, that's not mental health treatment, and
No.
so we now have full-time mental health treatment. When I was putting together the framework for our substance use disorder treatment program, which we call SMART, which stands for Successful Mental Health and Addiction Recovery Treatment.
Thank you for that, because I don't do well with acronyms.
Yeah, well, that was one thing I learned here in Florida is that everything is an acronym.
Oh, God, yes.
But I, had looked in, and at the time, Epic Behavioral Health was located in St. Augustine, and they had I know more now what they have, but at the time I thought they had, what was a similar program that I was, operating in New York, which was a jail substance program. It's not anything like what we're doing. In fact, they're actually now just trying to replicate it in St. John's, but they haven't been able to do it yet. But my thought process was really kind of self-centered. It's like, I don't want to have to retrain somebody I want this program off the ground as quickly as possible. So I partnered with Epic. Epic had a relationship at the time with Flagler Hospital, and Flagler Hospital was looking at putting a hospital in the northern part of Flagler County. And the big focus I had was they were going to have 10 mental health beds, and I thought if I can get an in with that organization, maybe I will be able to have some dedicated bed space for my inmates, because when I have a severely mentally ill, an SMI inmate, there's no services in this area for me to send them to. And at the time, It was only SMA in Daytona, which I had, had a lot of problems with initially. They're a great partner now, but we had some problems back in the early days. So it was really self-centered in terms of why I brought Epic. But what happened is bringing Epic into the Flagler really ignited SMA to start looking at we've got to develop a more broader footprint in Flagler, because
Competition is good.
exactly. And so, you saw them open the crisis stabilization unit in Bunnell. They now have funding. They're going to be putting a receiving facility with bed space right on Justice Lane, right up the road. So that's going to, in 2027, I'm told, when that opens, is going to directly benefit. So, I look back and the work that we were doing in the jail and at the sheriff's office, and this is what Sheriff Staley told me his frustration was that there's always a lot of talk in Flagler County, but there's all these groups and these commissions and committees that meet, but he said you never would see any tangible results. And so we really drove some tangible results in that, igniting a market for treatment really benefited Flagler County immensely by, you look at the level of services that exist here today, just 4 years ago did not exist. So.
I agree with you 100%. We've had these conversations off air. We need so much here. The housing issue, as you mentioned, is still a big issue. When I get involved with it earlier, I was working with Pastor Charles Solano. We opened the first recovery house in Flagler County. Mm-hmm. It was in Bunnell. And in the beginning, the whole community came against us. Okay, they've now understand that there's been a benefit, and the areas that he has opened his houses and other houses don't suffer.
Right. Well, and it not only benefits, we look at it and the focus is on, the inmates, but, my broader focus is on, my deputies as well. And so, making them a bigger part of improving the perception of our detention staff in the community improves our status in the community. It improves our perception within the agency. And so, we're very fortunate that Sheriff Staley, promotes a lot of the good work that gets done in the detention facility that, is hopefully, gives my staff, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of that they're not just showing up and punching a clock and watching the same revolving door. They're actually part of bettering our community. And, our motto is improve inmate outcomes, improves our community. And that's kind of what is our mantra.
That is so important. It is in the line of what we do here at the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation. It's when we see the successes, it's what keeps us going. So for your deputies and stuff, if they can see that same thing, it really keeps them going. It doesn't turn them into changing their attitude. It improves it. When that happens, relationships improve. When the relationships improve, the results improve.
Right.
And that's just so important. So I'm really happy to hear that that's a goal of not only doing it, but it's an actual goal that you have and the department has to do that. It's just so very important. And, you know, getting back into the housing area, we need more houses for people in recovery, sober living, that people can go and feel safe and continue their walk. And I think the community is starting to see some of the benefits of that. We don't hear as much of not in my backyard kind of conversation as we did back then. And
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, Mike, the opioid crisis really, and I can speak to my own career. I went through the crack epidemic in the 90s, in the late 90s. But that did not have the broad reach that the opioid epidemic had. And, for the first time in the early 2000s, mid-early 2000s, you had all walks of life impacted by prescription abuse at the time, which was leading then to the heroin, bringing heroin back onto the scene because it was a cheaper alternative to, the prescriptions. But the rampant, just widespread demographics that, we were seeing incarcerated really opened the eyes of America basically to where, people wanted to know, what are you doing for, Johnny or Josie or whoever is my child or my dad or my mom or my grandfather while he's in your custody, because he's never been in custody before. We weren't dealing with your typical criminogenic behaviors. We were dealing with addiction and crimes that were related to addiction. And so really that prompted jails to really start revisiting and relooking, and sheriffs, frankly, across the country to relook at how are we can't just be a warehouse and a holding center for them to just go on to state prison. We have to become part of the solution. We're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. And frankly, in the county jail, 70%, 75% are going right back into the community. So what are we doing to prepare them for reentry into the community? How are we making our community safer if we're not doing anything while we have them in our custody for that period of time? So that's where a lot of the focus on programming, treatment, and that type of initiative really was prompted by that the terrible opioid epidemic.
Yeah, and that's the area that we look at too, not from your incarceration point of view, but in general, getting the public to understand there's no boundaries to this.
No.
Okay, we talk about the Drug Court Foundation was the first nonprofit in Flagler County to get the grant to give free Narcan away, and the family that leads our Narcan distribution group, lost a child to an overdose. They lived in a guarded, gated community. Okay? That guarded, gated didn't keep that pusher from getting in and bringing those drugs to that young girl and her dying over it. Okay? So people have to understand that, and I think the sheriff will probably agree with this, that when we see the overdoses that are going on, more of them are happening not in the hood, not out in the western part of the county, but they're in the major part of the county, which is Palm Coast, where the money is. So we have to open our eyes to the whole thing. And my big point of view is everybody has an opportunity to be part of the problem or part of the solution. Part of the solution doesn't mean you have to be actively involved, but you have to understand what's causing the issues. What are these people going through that brought them into that? And your mental health area is the area that we talk about, because over 90% of the people that are in substance abuse are covering up some type of trauma in their life that never got dealt with.
Well, we as our program has evolved, we have two peer specialists, which I always say this with all due respect to our clinicians and our licensed practitioners. They are so very important, and the role that they play is so important in a recovery program. But the most influential and the most instrumental piece to any treatment recovery program, as particularly in a jail setting, are those peers, because that is the recovery in real life in action that they see, that they can relate to. I've got a gentleman that comes back, one of our first graduates from the program, doing very well. And when he comes into the program, and he comes in from time to time just to give some life lessons and some talk, and also to promote some housing that he operates in as a caseworker for, but he can literally walk over to the bunk that he spent, over a year of his life in at the Flagler County Jail. And just to see the inmates' reaction to this guy is just like me. He was in the throes of addiction, and he was incarcerated. He's got a criminal record. He slept in the same bunk, frankly, that I slept on, and he's walking out that door at 4 o'clock, and he's doing well. He's successful. He drives his own vehicle, has his own apartment. That's, if he can do it, I can do it. And so that's really, but to your point about trauma, when last year, as a team, as we, assess, what's going on in the program, it became very evident that we were having a difficulty in addressing trauma. And in our world, trauma is a huge element of, many of the backgrounds of those who are in addiction. Seeing violence in the home at a very young age, and amongst the female population, 90% of them have had, not only violence, but sexual violence. And so when, in our program, through all evidence-based, by the way, we do interactive journaling, rap, matrix, we have a number of elements to our program. It peels back the onion, and we start addressing root cause. And oftentimes we have individuals who this is the first time they've ever been in treatment in their life. And so they have never even really not only recognized, but let alone tried to start dealing with the trauma that they, had basically used, drugs and to just mask. And we were struggling, really struggling. So we submitted a GAM, which is a grant management, application to move some monies around in the program. And we funded a clinician, full-time clinician. So as of last year, we now have 2 embedded peer specialists. We have an intervention specialist that we always had. But in addition, now we have a 4th component, which is the clinician. So we have a clinician who provides individual and group therapy counseling to our SMART program participants. And that's been so beneficial for us having her on board, because that was an area, that we really struggled with. But it's a program that we very much monitor. Right now, we're actually being peer-reviewed in the 2nd largest criminal justice journal in the country, 2nd largest in the world. The largest in our country. There's a journal in England, I'm told, that's the largest in the world. But hopefully by this fall, we will be published in our program, and the results of our program will be published in this journal, which will be significant for, Flagler County to be, have a program that's recognized, through the lens of the criminal justice community in that high space. We, the early results, we have graduated, I think, pretty close to 204 or 205 to this point. We've had about, we're running right around 59 to 60% have not relapsed and have not been rearrested. So we're running some very good numbers as far as that goes. Again, we're, 2.5 years in, but let me tell you, I've got a number of those graduates. In fact, Bill's one of them. He had never had more than 4 months of sobriety since he was in his teens. So when you're talking about somebody, 2.5 years, maybe those in the community might think, well, that's not really a long time. But for some, that is a eternity, because of how much they've been embroiled in an addiction battle for their whole lives, and many of them since they were, children.
We had a young fellow in the drug court program, and he was in a severe automobile accident at the age of 13. He's got more metal in his back that he can't walk through the gates of the airport without setting things off, type of thing. And until he got himself in trouble. He was in the Green Roof Inn. We went and interviewed him, and he had more pain pills. When Mr. D and I interviewed him that day, he said, "Yeah, I got about 1,000 of them at home." I said, "You want into this program?" "Yes, I do." I said, "Are you willing to turn those in?" "Yes, I am." And he did. And it's now been almost 2 years now. He hasn't even had an aspirin.
Great.
First time in his entire life. He says, "I still have pain, but I've learned how to deal with that." So these programs, when you can get to the depths that you're talking about, okay, and dealing with the traumas and dealing with the other issues. There's so many, I'm sorry, and you know who I am. There's so many treatment providers out there that just deal with getting them clean for a while and don't dig into the cause and effect. I can cut myself and it can get infected and I can put a Band-Aid on it, but if I don't deal with the infection, the Band-Aid ain't going to hurt. It's not going to help. So we need to do things like you're doing. The community needs to do those kinds of things. We need to reach out, and I'm one that says it's not just the government's job. It's a combination of private and government to work together to get these issues resolved and to work on improving what we can provide for our people. And the Sheriff's Department is one of the 2 counties organizations, or I was corrected the other day at a meeting, one of 3 county organizations that do something to help in this world. Okay, we have the school system, which is working on different programs for the schools to develop education to prevent. And then we have the drug court, Flagler County Drug Court, that works with it. And then we definitely have the sheriff's department that's working on. You don't want people coming back. You want them to go out and have a successful life. We need more individual units of both the cities and the counties, and we need, as a public, to get together and help them in what they need to support them and do the stuff that we need to do as citizens of the community.
Well, one of the things that we've been focused on since day one, when we were awarded the grant, is our framework is we have a grant. We need to be successful so that we can then, at some point, I plan to have a whole room full of individuals that were successfully graduated from the program that are, can speak to the benefits that they have received in the program so that the county commissioners will say, this is important for Flagler County. We need to continue this in the future.
Well, one of the things you can do even now, if you have some of your people that have graduated, that are out, and you think might be a good for them to come and talk on this particular podcast, talk about their experience, we'd love to have them. We're looking for people that have been through the recovery program, that are currently and still in recovery and doing well, and can reach back and say, because there's so many variables on how they get there, to talk about that, to encourage the people that are still out there struggling and just get them to the point where they say, I want it. Because, they got to want it. Otherwise, they ain't going to get it.
Gift of desperation.
So get them out there. So if you have participants in your program that you think might be good to come on out and talk, we've had two of your peer specialists here already, both Will and Danielle, and they did a great job. And if people want to go out, hit our YouTube channel, go to the Flagler Voice, and then go through all the YouTubes. You'll see Will and Danielle that are out in the jail, the peers out there, and their stories and how they're helping out. And again, I'd like to take this time to thank you for spending this time, because I know you've got a busy schedule. You had a graduation today.
I did. We graduated two men and a female today.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't get there. I was here finishing some stuff up here, but I'd like to get back to do that again. I used to get to the graduations. Lately, it's been a little tough. So again, Chief, thank you.
Thank you
For what you do, what the sheriff has done to help people in our county, and let them be successful citizens.
Thank you, Mike, for all you do for the recovery community in Flagler County as well.
All right, everybody. We'll be back here in just a minute, and we'll go from there. Hey, everybody. Mike Feldbauer from the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation, inviting you to our third annual golf tournament on May 24th at Palm Harbor Golf Club. This is one of our annual fundraisers. Help us help those in the community in recovery. Have a great day. Good food by Loopers. Some great gifts. Some contests out there on the course. Come join us. For information, call me at 4 or email me at mfeldbauer, FELDBAUER @gmail.com. Have a great day.